So now we will go ahead and begin our program. So initially we are going to have speakers, and it is my pleasure to introduce the very first and keynote speaker of today's program. The first speaker is Alex Strong. Alex Strong is a director of development in the University of Arizona's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Alex is inspired by all types of learning and discovery, from the classroom to the lab bench and beyond. Alex holds a Master of Public Administration and MA in Arts Administration from the Indiana O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, and a Bachelor's of Music Education from Central Michigan University. As part of the Advancement, Advocacy, Alumni Affairs, and Corporate Relations team, Alex works to develop relationships between the college and a wide variety of individual, public, and private stakeholders. Alex draws on experience at other institutions of higher education, including the University of Arizona, Oakland University, Michigan State University, Lansing Community College, and Indiana University, developing public-private partnerships, as well as contracting, grantee, grantor, and philanthropic relationships. So today, Alex is going to talk to you about a very, very interesting topic: learning, discovery, and engagement, approaches to building partnerships with universities. So thank you, Alex, and it's all yours. Please go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you, Sadhna. It's fantastic to be here, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you for having me. Thanks to the school. Really fantastic to get to chat with colleagues here at the U of A and outside the U of A. The title of my talk today, Learning, Discovery, and Engagement, comes from the former stated purpose of land-grant universities from the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. Actually, since then, it's technically been updated to talent, innovation, in place, but really, these three pillars, I think, really are the core of what we do, especially engagement. After all, all the learning and discovery in the world hardly makes a difference if it's not translated outside the walls of the university somehow into the wider world. There aren't really any one-size-fits-all solutions for engagement, but in the spirit of promoting ideas and getting those creative juices flowing, I wanted to take my time today to highlight some of the ways that we here at the University of Arizona and CALS partner with folks outside the university to solve technical problems, to build talent pipelines, shape and inform policy, and fulfill our role, as the state's land-grant university. I can only speak sort of as an individual from my own perspective and from my own experience about how all of this works. But the examples all come from CALS and the University of Arizona, but those principles could be applied in any number of other contexts. However, before we dive into that, some of you may be wondering the same thing that I was when I got up this morning. Why am I here? What is this guy doing speaking at a food safety conference? That's me pictured above, not a few years ago and with a little bit more hair than I've got now. But apart from working in a few kitchens as I paid my way through music school, I don't really have an appreciable background in food safety per se. But if you'd indulge me for just a couple of minutes, I'd love to share a little bit about my story and how I got here, because I think it sheds some light on how I personally approach relationship building within higher education and lays the groundwork for the rest of my talk. So, like I alluded to before, I went to school for music. The plan, for me at least, was to be a music professor, which sort of meant going for the long haul, getting 3 degrees, a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate before really hitting the audition circuit and trying to land a job. And that experience was really fantastic. I'm really lucky to have it. However, it was also fantastically expensive. And, you know, anybody that's gone through higher ed recently knows that cost can get out of control. And for me, I had to find a way to nip that in the bud. So I found my way into a job at a little office called the Grad Grant Center at Indiana University. And this is where really my eyes were opened to the possibilities involved with partnering with higher education. Because what we did at the Grad Grant Center is we actually worked with other graduate students, and I worked with students from all disciplines across the university that were primarily working on their own research, whether it was theses, dissertations, what have you, to find funding and support to make those projects go. And it really broadened my perspective from the narrow scope that I had to really the types of things that research and students and outreach from higher education do to influence the world around us. And, you know, as it happened, that ended up gripping me even more than my intended career in music. And I switched career paths, and I actually dove headlong into a career working to support research and higher education, not being a researcher myself. So, you know, after I left school, I went on to work with a number of different universities, some of which are listed here. Sadhana listed some in my introduction, and then they really run the gamut as far as different types of university, you know, technical universities and their community colleges, really big research institutions like IU and Michigan State that are really quite similar to U of A. So over my time, I've seen a broad swath of universities and colleges and other institutions of higher education work with their stakeholders in a number of ways. And I think that understanding that, you know, for any given institution of higher education is really key in thinking of ways to how they might engage and build relationships with their stakeholders. So, you know, I think it's important to see where, you know, from my line of work, where the University of Arizona fits in that landscape, which is, as I see it, it goes something like this. You know, if you take this rectangle and you think of it as the entire post-secondary education world, every community college, technical institute, Yale, Harvard, us, University of Arizona, all of it, we fit, you know, within the subcategory of public education, and within that, we fit with colleges and universities offering 4-year degrees and graduate degrees. Within that, we fall within a category of universities called R1s that have very high research activity that comes from the Carnegie classification of institutions of higher education. And that puts us in the same category as schools like ASU or UCLA or all of the other, like, you know, when you think of big colleges and universities, typically they are R1s. And within that group, you know, we fall within a very special group that I alluded to before, land grant universities. And this is where we derive that mission of learning, discovery, and engagement from specifically. And, you know, there are land grant universities all over the United States. Each state's got at least one. Typically, they are public universities, although there are a few odd examples out there. For example, Cornell does not necessarily fall within the public education sphere. They're a private institution, but generally speaking, they're large public universities. And their history goes back a long ways. In fact, every day as I walk to my office, I pass by a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, who signed the first moral act into law establishing the first land-grant universities to promote agriculture and mechanic arts. And coupled with that, later on down the line, we got the Hatch Act of 1887 that established our agricultural experiment stations, and the Smith-Lever Act that established the cooperative extension systems, which really form the backbone of the area of the university that I work with the most, that experiment station, the cooperative extension, and the College of Agriculture of Life Sciences in our outreach mission, and it sort of shapes the way that we operate within the world. Now, the CALS is one of 16 different colleges in the university, and we've also got extension and the experiment station, as well as our global campus, which is our online presence. So understanding all of that sort of sets the framework for how specifically we at the University of Arizona and the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences operate and build relationships with our stakeholders. And then within the college, there's actually my department: advancement, advocacy, alumni affairs, and corporate relations, which is a mouthful, but we can break that down like this, right? So the sort of the four components of our department are advancement, fundraising, advocacy, reflecting on the public sector, alumni affairs, working with past graduates, and corporate relations, working with industry. And I don't do it alone. I'm not a one-person department. In fact, there is a whole slew of us that work together, and I have the privilege of working with this fantastic team pictured below. And so I think for the balance of my talk, I think it makes sense to work through each of these four functions of how we do what we do in turn, and then come back to see how they all work together. Because truth be told, they don't typically work in isolation. If you're working with somebody on a relationship that has ramifications for advancement or corporate relations, they may also spill over into being alumni or having influence on the public sector as well. But for the sake of organizing my talk, I think we can just run down them in order, starting with advancement. This is the heart of advancement is generating charitable gifts for the university and the college. And in the case of when we say charitable gifts, we mean gifts that are voluntary transfers of wealth or resources that are motivated by detached and disinterested generosity. At least that's how it's phrased for the letter of the law. And so when you give to your local food pantry, church, or any other charitable organization, this is the kind of donation that we talk about when we're talking about with advancement. Which is not to say that necessarily everything that we do in the realm of advancements is about tugging on the heartstrings, although there is some of that. And it doesn't mean that the work that we do has to necessarily be irrelevant to our field, what we do professionally to make money. In fact, quite the contrary. We have a history of a number of philanthropic gifts that are deeply tied to industry in one way or another. A couple of great examples are actually within the field of food safety itself. We've got actually two chairs that are endowed in food safety right now, one of which Sadhna was talking about earlier, Margaret Cooper, who heads up our food safety education programs, training the next generation of food safety professionals and using philanthropic support to do that, even though it comes back to benefit folks in industry, whether it's leafy greens or other food industries across the state and the nation. They're still supported by charitable gifts. Same thing goes for Dr. Channa Rock, who just recently received an endowed chair in extension fresh produce safety. And Dr. Rock's work is deeply tied to industry as she works with individual growers in the leafy green industry and various stakeholders in the public sector, FDA, EPA, etc., all the same, this endowed chair is supported by philanthropy and is meant to come back and lend stability to the fresh produce industry. And so those are great examples of how we can use advancement in charitable giving to still build effective relationships that come back and benefit our stakeholders in industry, as long as those benefits aren't specific to individual donors. The next pillar of what we do is advocacy. And while this relates to the public sector, it's not lobbying. In fact, the university has its own Office of Government Relations, and we, in our department, do no lobbying whatsoever. We're actually not allowed to do that in any capacity. Instead, we have the science that we do. Our position as a land grant university sort of makes us a natural fit to do the science that ends up informing policy when it comes to things like natural resources, food safety, water resources, that kind of thing. And so we've got these two different centers that I think are really great examples of the way that we at the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences have an impact on advocacy. So first, the Natural Resource Users Law and Policy Center is a unique partnership between CALS, College of Ag and Life Sciences Cooperative Extension, and the James E. Rogers College of Law here at the university. They address underrepresented law and policy needs of the natural resource community in Arizona. In the West, they work on training the next generation of lawyers that are going to be working in natural resources. They run a law clinic for natural resource users, and they have had a big impact in a number of different industries, everything from ranchers and rangeland users to the mining industry and beyond. And then when it comes to the Water Resources Research Center, you'd have to really be working hard to avoid hearing about various issues pertaining to water policy here in Arizona lately. The WRRC tackles key water policy and management issues and uses those to empower informed decision-making and enrich our understanding of, enrich our understanding of how to use water resources effectively through science and conversations with important stakeholders. And I should mention that the Water Resources Research Center, that's headed up by Dr. Sharon Megdal and her team, who are working constantly with really important stakeholders when it comes to water users, policymakers, and scientists, everybody from national level politicians all the way down to individuals and homeowners to help secure our water future. The next pillar of what we do is alumni affairs, and this entails a lot of the fun stuff you think of when it comes to being an alumni and working with the university. This is your football games, your basketball games, homecoming, other events, that kind of thing. Within CALS, we have an alumni council, which is a group of volunteers that we gather a few times a year to seek input on what's going on out in the world around us and help align the activities that we do within the college to fit that and respond to that. And then the university itself has got its own alumni association. Alumni affairs is not necessarily like all the others, done in a bubble or isolated from the others. In fact, when we're talking about advancement or corporate relations or any of these other factors, it's frequently alumni that we go to first, and it is often through alumni relationships that we in these other domains of the work that we do. And then the last pillar of what we do is corporate relations. And I think it makes sense to actually split that into two parts, because with corporate relations, there is talent development. That is, what are we doing to train the next generation of professionals, whether it's undergraduate students or graduate students or post, sure that they are competent and competitive and prepared for jobs that don't even exist yet. And then the other side is research, which we'll get to in a minute. So two good examples of what we do when it comes to corporate relations and talent development. One is what you see pictured up top here. Is our career center. So the College of the Cal's Career Center's mission is to cultivate an entrepreneurial mindset in all of our students, and they offer broad support to students in preparation for whatever may come after they earn their degree from Cal's. It's headed up by faculty member Matt Mars, and we really take it seriously to invest in the resources as a college to make sure that our students are really, truly prepared to be responsive to the needs of the professional workplace once they leave. And then at the graduate level, we have lots of narrowly tailored opportunities, but one particularly good one are the folks that you see below, which are our Cal's Impact Leader Fellows. That's headed up by Dr. Kristen Limisand, who actually works in the School of Animal and Biomedical Sciences and is our Assistant Dean for Education. And it's a collaboration with Bayer Crop Sciences, actually, where we offered a cohort of 16 Cal students the opportunity to hone their communication, leadership, and teamwork skills through workshops and one-on-one mentoring with actual professionals out in the field. It works hand in glove with the Career Center, but it's just a really great example of how we are making sure that our students and the talent that we're producing are keyed into the needs of the world around us. And then there are the other opportunities for talent development that you might think of. Things like participating in advisory boards for various parts of the college. Like our Norton School of Family and Consumer Sciences has got an advisory board, as well as several smaller programs like biosystems engineering or other majors or programs within the college. And those are a fantastic way to get input directly from leaders in industry, as well as supporting internships and undergraduate research to help prepare our students for success. And then the other side of corporate relations are research and services, right? So the university, its own department of sponsored research and contracting services, and they work on all manner of different contracts with people, whether it's testing out the new devices or anything else that you would need to have a contractual relationship with the university, often goes through sponsored research and contracting services. Within the college, we've got a number of labs and outfits that offer fee-for-service arrangements. A couple of examples are like our food product and safety laboratory, which is does outreach and training, in addition to also harvest and kill of meat products at our Campbell Avenue farm that's headed up by Dr. Sam Garcia. We have our aquaculture pathology lab, who actually serves as a sponsor today, that's headed up by Dr. Arun Dar, and they offer fee for services for training, for diagnostic services, as well as the other aspects of what they do. So those are just a couple of examples of how we work in transactional relationships with industry. We also have our cooperative extensionists stationed at offices throughout the state. We've got at least one cooperative extension office within each county across the state, and our extensionists have a specific mandate to get out and be responsive to the needs of their geographic area. So we've got our extension office here in Pima County or in Yuma County or up in Maricopa that are working hard to address the needs, whether it's research or outreach or translation of those communities specifically. And we also have public-private partnerships. And a really great example of that is actually another sponsor I saw on the list today is the Yuma Center for Excellence in Desert Agriculture. They're a really innovative public-private partnership that works to connect scientists to work in desert agriculture. And they put science to work to address the challenges of developing arid land crop production, and they focus on high priority ideas that are actually brought to them from industry directly. YCETA works on a membership model where they collect input on what needs to be worked on at any given time. And the beauty of things like it doesn't strictly have to be partnerships with the U of A that they work with. They actually draw, when needed, scientific talent from other universities outside the university system. They're really a great conduit for addressing needs of a pretty specific subgroup of industry. And that's headed up by Paul Brierly, the executive director. He does a fantastic job with that. And it's just a really, really cool idea that I encourage everybody to look up if you're not familiar with it already. And then there are other opportunities that sort of fall outside of those four pillars that we were talking about. Things like working with foundations, right? So this is the world that I come from sort of a grant writing perspective, but way back when I was in the Grad Grant Center and beyond. And foundations are a sort of special type of stakeholder group that can drive initiatives all by themselves or really have an accelerating effect on things that are already happening. Often, what foundations are looking for are buy-in from other stakeholders. So that either the university or industry cares about issue X or Y or Z, it goes a really long ways in making an application or a proposal to a foundation compelling. And I'll show some more examples of that in a bit. But these four specifically are foundations that we are either aligned with or have a history with ourselves. The Marley Foundation is local here to Arizona, and they, there's actually a building named after Marley on campus, and they were critical in supporting the development and launch of our fairly new College of Veterinary Medicine. The Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research is a public-private hybrid foundation. I think it gets support from, I believe it's the USDA, but they work on a collaborative funding model where they only give out dollars that are matched one-to-one from industry. So they have an explicit goal to have industry buy-in for whatever projects they support, and they end up essentially doubling the impact of whatever research dollars are going because they will put those additional dollars on a one-to-one match in. Bill and Melinda Gates is probably the biggest and most well-known foundation in the world. They give out something absolutely wild, like $5 billion each year, but including to the U of A. So, and they've actually supported our Scanalyzer gantry, which I'll talk to. But they have a specific interest in things like securing the world's food future, and are particularly well aligned with the kind of works that we do here in food safety and just food resource generally. And then there's another great example is the Burroughs Wellcome Fund, who has a really specific and narrowly tailored program specifically on regulatory science, where they really, really want to key in on influencing policy decisions when it comes to food and drug regulation, which is of really specific interest to what we do here at the U of A, and I think the folks on the call today. All of this is to say is that foundations tend to be really specific, really idiosyncratic in their needs and their desires to make an impact. And as we consider working with them, it's sort of important to take stock of where their interests align with our own. So with all of that in mind, with those pillars of what we do, advancement, advocacy, alumni relations, and corporate relations, there are a few really, really good examples that cross those boundaries that we've done recently here at the U of A. If you take a look at the upper left there, you'll see a headline from NBC News about the work of Dr. Ian Pepper, how the University of Arizona used number 2 to solve its number 1 problem, where Dr. Pepper used wastewater testing to test for coronavirus DNA as a way to get out ahead of testing requirements and isolate cases before they became outbreaks. It was really, really important work, and ultimately scaled up to just an enormous scale, saving lives all over the globe. But it all started with, it really started in an application through philanthropic gift that actually came out of the blue, where we took this gift and used it to test a pilot program in porta potties, actually, for field workers in the greater Yuma area as they were working on harvesting product out of the fields. And you could test these porta potty rows for coronavirus in a way to isolate work crews before a coronavirus outbreak happened. And it worked so well that spun up into an ongoing contract relationship with first Yuma County and then the state and beyond, many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, testing full-time all over the county and the globe. And I hesitate to even quote a number of how many dollars have gone into it, because every time I do, that number gets bigger. And I think it's just a really prime example of how philanthropic relationship that's advancement spun out into something bigger through advocacy. We're working with these big public agencies to make a huge difference, and really relying on our core competencies as an institution of higher education to do that. The next example is the upper right there. That is the TerraRef phenotyping platform, or what we just call the Scanalyzer up at the Maricopa Ag Center. And that actually went the other way. That started as a federal facility. I believe it was built by the Department of Energy to study crops for biofuels, but eventually made its way into the possession of the University of Arizona. And through a big gift from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we actually extended the rails that it was on to double the size of the scannable area that's underneath it. And it's a really amazing piece of equipment. It's been described to me as the Hubble telescope of agriculture, and the fantastic work that our researchers, Duke Pauli and Eric Lyons, are the PIs on that project when it comes to scanning and sensing technologies. Big data applications in higher ed are they're amazing. And that wouldn't have been possible without these relationships outside of the university. Left is our own Dr. Shanna Rock, hard at work in the field. I told a little bit about her story earlier, but she's a recipient of an endowed chair. That is, that's advancement, right? These are philanthropic gifts that support the work that she does. But the funds that endowed chair are really crucially important in giving her the flexibility to respond to potential food safety issues when it comes to fresh produce in real time, right? An issue when it came to things like E. coli outbreaks is that they happened so fast and they caused such a panic that there was no time to apply for grant funding or find other money to do the kinds of outreach that we needed to do. And through advancement and fundraising and corporate relations, because a lot of those gifts come from companies, we are able to help lend a lot of stability to a really important industry subsector. And then the final example is Rito Park right here in Tucson, the birthplace of quarter horse racing, which has an ongoing partnership with our own racetrack industry program, in which our students have an unparalleled hands-on training experience and ability to actually work in industry in a way that it would be hard to imagine matching anywhere else. It's really serves as an extension of the racetrack industry classroom. When you go, much of the work that's being done is actually being done by students, and it's amazing to see. It's a really great example of a partnership between the Rito Park Foundation and the racetrack industry program itself. And so these 4 examples, they're not comprehensive. They're all really highly tailored to the needs of the stakeholders involved. But I think that they're really great examples of the kind of thinking that we need to do when it comes to building partnerships between the U of A or other institutions of higher education and the outside world. And what all 4 of them have in common is that they're built on hundreds of hours of listening and matchmaking with our faculty and our staff, in our own department, to really make those relationships responsible to everyone's need. And the bottom line is that it's super important to have people that make those connections and help fill that role for CALS in advancement, alumni, advocacy, and corporate relations. So for those of you at the U of A or that are interested in working in the U of A, by all means, feel free to get a hold of me or anybody in our department. We'd be happy to help navigate those waters for you or answer any questions. And I can also answer any questions now.
Thank you so much, Alex, for the very informative presentation. I think we learned a lot about collaborations here. So we do have one question in the chat. I'm going to read it out. And the question is from Norm Barnett, one of our advisory committee members. He's asking, can this corporate relations, that is talent development, also apply to future development of government or regulatory agencies?
When you say development of government or regulatory agencies, what do you mean by that exactly? Is the question asker on the call?
Not agencies, but agents or regulatory personnel.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think certainly folks that are studying, for instance, going through our food safety track or in any number of other degrees at the University of Arizona could be well set up to work in public agencies too, right? We have a number of graduates that go on to work at organizations like Farm Bureau is a big one. We have a number that work in consultative functions in like senator's office, representative's office, across the political spectrum, left and right. So yeah, certainly the talent development that we do applies to careers in public service as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We have, if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat. Meanwhile, I have a quick question for you, Alex. So you went through a few different, types of careers, changes, public administration, arts administration, music, and now you are in development. Can you, give a kind of message to the students? Because, these days students go through several changes and they're nervous as to, this is going to work out or not. So what will be, your message to our students?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I certainly have come a long way, long ways away from playing the trombone. I do hardly any of that in my day-to-day work, believe it or not. But if I had to offer advice to students, I would say be opportunistic, right? Like it can be really easy to get really narrowly focused on being X or Y or Z, but I think the nature of work and all manner of industries is changing so fast that it's important to have your eyes wide open to opportunities as they come, and so not necessarily jumping careers willy-nilly, but being smart and paying attention to what opportunities are out there.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Again, I know we are running out of time for questions. So I really appreciate the time you took to educate us about collaborations and strengthening the collaborations with the industry and, other types of relationships, foundations, and so on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. It's just one guy's opinion and how I see it, but I'm happy to chat with anybody anytime. I drop my email in the chat below, so if anyone wants to drop me a line, I'd be happy to interact more. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you.